Right, welcome everybody. Today I'm delighted to have with me for In Conversation Jack Richards. He tells me one of two people ever to have played cricket for England. That is high honour indeed, because we've had quite a few rugby players, we've had world champion boxers, we've had a few Premiership footballers, but for only two people to play cricket for England from Cornwall is indeed huge honour, and I'm going to ask Jack a bit about that. And then he went on to have a glittering career in the renewable energy field. And then more recently is the ambassador for the Stadium for Cornwall, which the Chamber of Commerce is backing wholeheartedly as a facility that we need both to encourage our youth to aspire highly and to inspire our businesses to aspire highly. Without world-class facilities, we're not going to be able to achieve. So, Jack, very warm welcome. Hi.
Yes, good afternoon to you, Kim.
So, I thought you were the only Cornish man. I don't know whether we've had Cornish women recently play cricket for England, but the only Cornishman to play cricket for England. But you told me there was one other.
Well, I have two jokes in the life. Is one says that how long ago is it since you played for England? And I always answer with about 3 or 4 stone. Although after COVID, I think it's close to 5 stone ago. And the other joke I have is that there's two people play for Cornwall, and the other person was Crap.
Right. Okay.
Crap, double B.
Okay.
So
was he? So he's even older than you, is he, Frank Crap?
Jack Crap was there in 1940s. So I think he left. He was born in Cornwall, left at the age of 3, and I think his career was curtailed during the Second World War, and ended up going to be an umpire. And apparently, he umpired one of the games I played when I was just starting as a professional cricketer. And I think his umpire was just like his name, to be honest about it.
Right. Okay. And we've had quite a few good county cricketers come from Cornwall, haven't we? And just not really made it up to the top level, up to the national level.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because it's quite surprising to think. See, I left Cornwall in 1975, and yet still we threaten to have people to do quite well, and yet don't seem to quite get on and make the grade. And I think even nowadays it's mostly more harder with the central contracts. But it's an element where I've come back to Cornwall, and I even played a season for Falmouth in the senior league here, just to get some experience and find out what it was all about. And yeah, we'll go on to facilities, but you need good facilities, but above all, it's getting the right mindset, because there's no doubt there is talent down here, and you must really see it in your business. There's a lot of talent, but talent is nothing if you don't have the right mindset. You can do a lot of things with talent, but mindset is the amount of right mindset to have, and that will to want to succeed, and not just be complacent on simple success. I think is which needs to be looked at.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, certainly that's true in business, but we at the Chamber of Commerce are always trying to get people to aspire higher. And of course, Cornish business is more than capable of doing that. But in my role as sports fan and junior rugby coach and so on, I often saw people with plenty of skills, but it is more difficult to coach that mindset, isn't it, of success? And I just wonder, in your long sporting and business career, whether there are any sort of techniques, or whether you've come across any gurus who've been able to sort of change that mindset in young people.
Well, I suppose the one guru I had is I married a Dutch lady nearly 40 years ago, and the Dutch have got quite an interesting mindset in terms of life, and certainly in terms of business and doing things professionally. And I suppose it's that attitude which set me down to be a little bit more, I would say, aggressive, and to be more single-minded in my approach to things, and forthright and out there. And it did me a lot of good. It also at times did not do me quite so well in terms of certain being outspoken, speaking my mind. At times in England, that's not quite accepted or acceptable. But I was out there, and I think at the end of the day, coming from 'cause, I came from Moor in Penzance. I was a son of a building inspector and a nurse, and really did not shine brilliantly at any real sports. I played rugby, Cornwall under 15s. I played for Cornwall under 15s cricket as well, but I wasn't really a shining light. There are other shining lights in the sport around me. But suddenly I got a determination to want to prove people wrong, and got the gap to go to Surrey, and just took it, and it's quite meteoric. But it does take a single-mindedness and the will really want to put everything aside and really want to do that. And that's what
not every 15-year-old boy or girl has got that sort of single-minded focus to enable them to do that. And it is pretty a bogged sort of state of mind, isn't it, that you need to get there, really, and presumably give up other stuff that your mates were doing at the same time in order to further a career, which was by no means a certain outcome of, at that stage.
Yeah, it was. Well, I don't want to sound boring, but it wasn't easy. And so I went from being comfortable in Cornwall to a degree to being uncomfortable in South London, to go and see a higher level of sport, which I'd never really come across really close up. Life in London was totally different to what Penzance was in the 70s. I was actually I was living in the area of the Brixton riots. I think single-mindedness was something that really puts down to me that I wanted to do well. So I was spending my weekends doing about 20 hours of cricket-orientated work. 4 hours was traveling to the training, and the other 8 hours a day was spent training in nets. And that's what I did week out. And
you can't replace that hard work, I guess, no matter what. It's quite an unusual young person who's prepared to commit 12 hours a day to one thing, I think, isn't it? And yet there's this theory now of 10,000 hours that one needs to do to be competent at something, and clearly that was in you to have that commitment. And I wonder whether, if you were taken out of your comfort zone with fewer friends and so on in South London, whether that actually freed you up in some ways to do that commitment to cricket that you would have otherwise spent, as we all do, messing around with mates.
Well, I think that's correct. It helped. There's no doubt about that. At the same time, I also did. I started an evening course to try and get my HNDs, because in those days, believe it or not, I had to qualify for Surrey. So I ended up working at a technical or electrical architect's office, T. Clark in Camberwell, and ended up doing evening classes as well to get a sort of certificate to be able to do some electrical drawing and understanding what it's all about. And suppose, of course, in those days you didn't have, daytime television. You had a lot of, you didn't have all the diversities of social media and life that the youngsters get nowadays. But still, it also wasn't easy. So to get to my training, I had to catch 3 buses. So that was from Catford, which is southeast, into Wandsworth, with cricket equipment, So I suppose I'm lucky to be in a position to force me to be isolated and to focus on improving. But at the same time, I could have sat at home and done nothing and just watched.
Indeed. So there's a certain nurture, certain self-determination which comes, which difficult to teach, as I say. And then from Surrey on to England, one or two great anecdotes before we move on, Jack, from the England's experience?
Well, I've been very lucky with, in some respects, being able to play for England. I suppose I'm also disappointed I didn't play more for England than I actually did. At the same time, I also backed up very early. I modest decided to back up at the age of 29. But for instance, with Ian Botham, though, just becoming Lord Botham, I was able to really be close to him on a couple of occasions. And one in particular is he got his fame with the Botham's Ashes.
Yeah.
Now, the year before that, I was reserve for England, and on that, after the Ashes, I got picked for the tour to India as a reserve keeper. So that's when it all kicked off with Botham. So, we were gathering together as England team in London, and suddenly we had to go to the ITV studios to meet Eamon Andrews, because suddenly Botham became on This Is Your Life. And then he also became, and I think he showed some extras recently, he became Sportsman of the Year. And we were told as the England team in India, the BBC team wanted to come and film a documentary. Of course, that was a facade to show that it was actually Ian Botham becoming Sports Personality of the Year. So we crowded onto this balcony, and I ended up coming in late, so I had to go and sit more or less right next to, I'd stand next to Botham in the background. And Lord and behold, I'm in shot quite a few times as the sports personality, which Mum and Dad quite enjoyed at the time. But being around Botham and being involved in a winning England team in the Ashes, I suppose, yeah, it was something special. It became even more special because I think it was 25 years before they won again. So every 2 years is quite a special team that I was involved in a team which actually, what some people said, did the impossible. But not only did we win the Ashes, and a lot of people forget, but we also won every competition there, which included beating the world-class West Indies on numerous occasions. So, we have a lot of fun with that. But I suppose at the end of the day, even in the 80s, then that was, when you're a part of such a big thing about, you're a part of it, and you don't really look at it. But now the odd occasion, last week I had I was being shown on TV. My kids have never seen me on TV, so through WhatsApp, my kids were able to watch a replay of me being on the TV. That was good. And of course, even when I've come back down here, it's a lot of people who have. I can remember when you got your 100. Everybody seems I got 100 at Perth, and a lot of cricket fans in Cornwall seem to understand. Well, I remember seeing you in the shop window, or remember this. So it's that's nice, and that's nice that people actually took the time out to follow you, even though at some stage I've been away from Cornwall for quite some time.
Yeah, no, fabulous, and great honour, and we're delighted to. I with my sports fan, and I'm delighted to be talking to you. So that was great, and tremendous to see Naughty Boy Botham elevated to the House of Lords. That is quite something, isn't it? Really. Well,
I thought Nike had a great job. Talk about marketing, commerce. Botham was sponsored by Nike. I can never forget when he got done for smoking his whatever he's not meant to smoke. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say it nowadays. I don't know. They have all this. Nike came out with a great advert. They had the Nike cricket shoe. Nike does it on grass. Great marketing,
Well, quite brave at the time, I suppose, but as you say, the right decision that it turned out. Yeah. Well, great. Well, great to hear about your cricket career. And then, so armed with that HND electrical surveying and your Dutch connection, you went on then to renewable energy. I'd like to hear a bit about that, because the local enterprise partnership, in consultation with Chamber of Commerce members 2 or 3 years ago now, have identified renewable energy in Cornwall as one of our great hopes. And I've been putting it in a few articles that I've written and said on radio recently, that we've got geothermal energy underneath us, because the same geology which gave us tin, which made us prosperous the first time round, is giving us geothermal energy. We've got hopefully lithium. Well, we have got lithium. It's just a matter of whether it's commercially viable to get it out. We've got the longest coastline of any county in England. So when offshore wind and tide and wave energy becomes viable, we're well placed for that. And we've got the most access to prevailing wind, so onshore wind and offshore wind, and the most hours of sunshine, so solar energy. So we look like we should have it made from a renewable energy point of view. I think we lost our mojo a bit in Cornwall. The latter half of the 20th century didn't really suit what Cornwall was good at. It was an era of mass-produced products. We didn't have the scale or the skills to do that. But I feel we've got something playing to Cornwall's strengths coming again. And I'd really like your insight, having made a career in that, as to whether I'm dreaming and whether what we need to do in order to capture those opportunities.
Well, I'll just sort of quantify my career I'm a good salesman, so I wasn't all my life, but when I left cricket early, I went into bulk carrier shipping and actually bought two big, I think nearly $2 million and £2 million worth of work into Farmworth at the time. So I went from a cricketing career. I played against West Indies in August '88, and in April '89, I was serving coffee to a Russian captain in the port of Rotterdam. Again, trying to prove myself. So I went through the bulk carrier business, and after a while, became quite successful. Got headhunted into an offshore recruitment company. So I spent the past 5 years when I was on the continent, which is now from about 2012 leading up to when I left 2017, more or less in and around the renewable business in Holland. And of course, when you had these big conglomerates getting involved, DMA, you had innovation, and these lovely huge vessels, and placing these windmills in the offshore sector. What was quite interesting is, of course, that became huge. It was a political requirement as well, because of course, but coal and gas and everything, what do they call those
fossil fuels?
Fossil fuels is what I'm trying to get. Fossil fuels, of course, was not the in for the governments over there. And of course, Holland had these huge companies, Heerema, who had facilities and the ships and the equipment ideally suited to place things like windmills in the sea and these windmill parks. And of course, the government in Holland and in Belgium and certainly in Germany went big time to support these industries to ensure that there was the new green fuel. But there's a 40% subsidy on all this business. And furthermore, what also we have to bear in mind is metal, steel, and moving parts, and wind and rain and salt water doesn't go together.
No.
And you had these fantastic windmill parks put out there, and then you see with the crew tenders, they did an awful lot of maintenance, an awful lot of I can say, ensuring that there's enough infrastructure within very close proximity to these wind farms necessary to ensure that they're well maintained and they are actually productive, and to ensure that when the power came to shore, you were in a position to either use that power straight away or at least store it in any way, shape, or form. And I think that also in those times was a bit of a problem which was not based upon. So you had Germany, had a great Rifkin, I think it was, North Germany, had a great offshore wind park. And we immediately had to sell all their power through to Holland and areas like that. So infrastructure, what was quite important to me is the subsidy of 40% for governments to be able to make it viable for these companies to make and place these windmills. And let's face it, the North Sea can be inhospitable because it was basically looking at areas of Holland and North Germany, the North Sea. And also, if you look at I think there's quite a few windmills off the east coast of England. Lowestoft became changed from being a fishing port to an offshore supply port, and certain areas of Scotland where these huge wind farms were being placed on the sea. Yet when you flew over them, you saw only half of them were working. So obviously, a lot of subsidy was put, a lot of political requirements were put there, so these windmill farms can produce this green energy. But in actual fact, the efficiency was pretty low.
Interesting. So they're not quite as green as one likes to think.
Obviously not.
Without 40% government subsidy.
Well, exactly that. And I think that's just one thing just to bear in mind, because, and you're talking about a coastline which has got huge ports, huge industry on the doorstep to produce the equipment necessary. So, if you look at the port of Amsterdam, IJmuiden, Rotterdam, Vlissingen, and then you go to Dunkirk, Calais, all the coast down, and you go to Hamburg, and you've got industrial port, industrial rivers, given the infrastructure to be able to assemble, to build, to supply, and then also place.
Okay.
Because if you've seen one of these, we once supplied crew to the Innovation, which is a ship which actually placed these windmills and at deep sea. It was a jacked up vessel.
Right.
Itself up 40 meters, and it's quite interesting if you go on the website to look at the Innovation, which is it's now about 5 years old, but it would put windmills on and it'll go out and then it'll jack itself up and have to place it in the North Sea. Highly efficient in terms of that, but a $250 million vessel.
So you're still, I mean, despite what I hear about the aspirations of the Falmouth Bay test project and things on the north coast, you're still saying we're a bit far from the big centres of population in Cornwall, the big centres of manufacturing of equipment in Cornwall to make it really viable yet. Is that an issue still?
I think I have to be, we have to look at the truth. The North Sea, as I said, it's surrounded by feeder hubs. Even at one stage, the Dutch were looking to build a man-made island in the middle of the North Sea to be able to service the bigger, bigger parts, because it needs also a lot of service. So it's not just a question of putting something out at sea. You need the infrastructure and the real service infrastructure to be able to maintain and keep it going.
Right. Okay.
And also to bring it ashore, where does it go?
How it's a bigger industry than you think of just putting an array of windmills offshore and towing them out there from Falmouth Bay. You've got a huge industry surrounding it to make it work.
Well, not only that, but you've got the depth of the water. The wind is advantage in terms of how it turns the turbines. But look at the seas. Is it able to stand up to the seas we get off that part of the world?
Yeah.
I would say, I don't want to be, I'm going to sound very negative, but let's look at in a factual point of view. Yes, we have sun, we have rain, we have wind, and we have waves, but it's nobody's really come to say this is the place to do it, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah,
there is a reason for that.
So
if I was to take you, okay. If I was to take a wind farm park, and let's say just put it off the coast of Bristol or Taunton there, it's more sheltered. There's a bigger infrastructure with what's going on around there. I would say the investment might be easier. So I'm not saying it can't be done, but I think the Cornish coast is harsh.
Okay.
It's also, if I may say, it's got a huge tide. Sorry, it's got a huge difference in tide. So you also have to consider the vessels to serve these elements also have to bear the tide difference in place. What ports do you have here who can serve such big areas?
Okay.
Tell me, Falmouth?
Well, Falmouth's their only one. They position themselves as Cornwall's fourth gateway, but it's a very small port compared with what exists up country, of course. So really, in the round, listening to you there, Jack, you'd be more optimistic about our onshore energy opportunities. I mean, the geothermal, the lithium, the wind, onshore wind, and solar are probably better opportunities to explore in the medium term. Then,
well, I went to attend at the Rugby World Cup inaugural luncheon in London, where there are quite a few Japanese companies, and Toshiba were there, and they're quite big into rugby, but also quite big into the lithium and the battery side. I think that must be very interesting. Of course, residues of lithium are not easily found throughout the world, so one can presume that's something which if you're niche, I would say that's something that must be looked upon in a big time. Of course, on shore, with what we have here, no matter wherever in Cornwall, the trees grow in the valleys, and on the hills there's nothing. So there's always wind. That's nothing. That's, I know by being part of Trio Road in Truro City how the wind goes. So
Yeah.
I think, and yes, and of course we need that, and it's not necessarily great for the beauty of Cornwall, but strategically placed and well designed, you can at least, I believe, create something in Cornwall as long as it can be utilised straight away. I think the key element is if you're invested in everything, even if you go down the road with the offshore, the idea is to make sure it's efficient, it's properly utilised and maintained, so that we can actually get all the benefit. It doesn't become a big white elephant, and it doesn't suddenly go in. I think that's the important element with it.
Well, I'm passionate about community energy production, and the Chamber of Commerce is supporting the local electricity bill. But I believe the national grid increasingly looks like a 20th century construct to me. Really, what we should be sorting out in Cornwall is that we can look after ourselves from renewable energy. And I strongly believe that if every village had its own windmill from which everybody was getting 30% reduction on their electricity costs for the sake of it, I've got no science to back that up, but for example, that we wouldn't see them such as an eyesore. We'd see them more like the church steeple, something around which the community gathered. But
it is progress. At some stage, the church steeple might have been ugly in terms of what is classified as progress. It's a necessity. My auntie, who lives in Helston, she's had her solar panels up for quite some time, and she's very happy even with that, and even the development of solar panels. With integration into new roofs and things like that, there's certainly an element which we must be able to utilise correctly, and I believe that being and it doesn't necessarily nowadays have to be too expensive or more expensive than what's necessary. And you see throughout the world, new houses have total roof, which is basically the solar panel collecting everything. Why can't
those photovoltaic panels, the tiles that you're talking about, I think it's a poor show, to be honest, that Cornwall Council don't insist that every new build, we've got a large part of the national plan, 50,000 new dwellings in Cornwall by 2030. Every new build, in my opinion, should be absolutely part of the building, that they've either got thermal or ground source or air source or solar photovoltaic tiles in the roof. And I don't know why that's not a requirement for somewhere like Cornwall. It would set us ahead of the thing at not a huge inflated cost either. So I must admit, I think that's something we need to hold our council to account a bit more strongly.
I believe so. As long as I've also been involved because of the stadium. I've been involved in the Langarth, the Garden Village plans and elements like that. And of course, there's a lot of goodwill there, but one has to look at the real practicality of it and to ensure what can be guided and what can be helped by the council and by the developers to ensure that we have a good, sound and ecological future. And in that respect, funny enough, it still ends up this, isn't it? It still ends up, what is it? It's not a long-term vision. It seems to be short-term, or let's build it cheaply and then pass it on to the incumbent who buys a house, take care of the bills and everything else. Whereas
it's disappointing though for Cornwall to just have not appropriate houses built on our green fields. I don't think it's the way ahead, I've got to say, but there we are. But if you moved seamlessly on then to Langarth and the stadium for Cornwall, Jack, and you've been appointed by Dickie Evans, that the one consortium now owns Pirates Rugby Club and Truro City Football Club, and we've seen a lot of improvements in the organisation of that combo over the last couple of years. We at the Chamber have supported it, as I said at the beginning, for all sorts of positive reasons, and yet it seems to have rumbled on for some time now. So briefly, in layman's terms, give us a quick update of where we're up to and what you see the benefits of the stadium being to Cornwall.
Well, I've fought a cost for the stadium. Dickie Evans, who I must say nowadays is, I don't know, half hated and half liked within the county. I don't know, but at the end of the day, it's people like him and Neil Tregarth and Penzance Cricket and and these private individuals who stand up and put private money into sport and into facilities, which sometimes are derided within Cornwall, within England, but we need them. You know, these people put an awful lot of money in, and I can only thank them that they actually do that for the local sport. It could also be to ensure that their legacy is good and their name is well looked after. But in actual fact, talking to them both, they have, you know, sport needs money. Certainly, sport within Cornwall, if it's to go to a certain level, needs private investment, and that's what they're doing. The stadium itself, yeah, it's one of these sort of governmental, typical British bureaucracy element, which is slowing everything down. And officially, I'm going to say, well, the council are helping, and they have helped, and we're waiting for the land to come across, and you know, it's coming, it's on its way. Unofficially, as a personal individual, I'm very frustrated at the fact that there's no diggers in the ground, and we've had to go through a whole load of bureaucracy and studies and everything else. Whereas basically, it's a project which is going to benefit business, it's going to benefit the local community, of which the Cornish Sparks will play 14 times on it, Truro City will play 22 times on it. So that's about 40 days of the year it's only used for those two teams. The rest is for the whole of Cornwall to use. So for me, that's a no-brainer. You know, with a conference facility. Now, I can remember being invited to one of your events in Newquay where, you know, we couldn't really put a big enough screen up, and we had to change things around because it's dated. You can't say it, but that had enough room for 200 people. It's one of the biggest venues. So you have a conference venue. Now, does Cornwall need a conference venue for 500 people? When I talk to the council, when I talk to yourself or your others, everyone would say, of course we do. So, you know, even that is something which is sort of put on the side. It's a conference venue. It's an educational centre for the college to have their catering sorted out, and there's going to be a big coffee shop there, which instead of everybody going to Starbucks up at the cross there, you know, they could be a little bit better and come in, have a coffee at the stadium, and also then maybe rent an office or go somewhere quiet to work. So you're trying to bring up one of these commonsensical projects. It's called a stadium, but I look at it as a business centre, conference centre, and a sport field next to it. So there's a lot of diversification in around it. Yet it's taking so much time. Of course, our project and the decisions around there have not helped because we're tied into that, as you quite rightly know. But we've got to get on. You know, we can't just this, and the COVID is certainly not help. But you know, I'm sure everybody's doing their best and their utmost under the restraints they have. But it's a bit unfortunate and a bit disappointing that we're not able really to kick on, force it, and get good projects like this, which are going to benefit not visitors, it benefits Cornish people.
Yeah.
Because it's there in the winter. The utilization of this is when it's dark and dingy and it's wind and rainy. We've got floodlights with a plastic pitch and facilities around. So it's for Cornwall the whole year round, and not just for, like some of our projects, for visitors to come in.
Yeah. You know, as somebody who spent their whole life in the private sector in small business, it sort of beggars belief, with a small amount of money in comparative terms that the stadium is costing, why it is such a problem. The benefits to Cornwall's youth, to our education, with Truro and Penwith putting their, you know, their business studies and things there, and you know, we had a consultation with Martin Tucker and Peter Child when he was chief executive of Pirates years ago, and made the business case to them for it, a conference facility, an exhibition hall, and so on and so forth. It does sort of beg a belief as to why it's taking quite so long to come to fruition. And I'm not sure, you know, I mean, I know people say, oh, well, it needs to be tied up with the planning for the houses in Langarth and so on and so forth. all right, well, fair enough, but it is only what 15, 16 million pounds we're looking at here. And if you look at what I don't know, HS2, 107 billion pounds. I mean, 50, 20 million is back pocket change, and as is now turned out in COVID, that's findable down the back of a sofa, I would have thought. So,
not only that, I think the private sector has put it in at least 8 million.
Yes,
you don't find that very often either. So it seems to me that instead of embracing the private sector funding, we've seemed to be putting it away, looking negative at it. But in fact, any people are prepared to put in 8 million to improve a facility, which is maybe sport orientated, but at the end of the day is a business facility, should be embraced, should be encouraged. We should not hang around. We should just get on, and at sometimes maybe the bureaucracy needs to go through, the studies need to be done, and I can understand that. But you're right, in the bigger scheme of things, it's not a lot of money, and it's going to, and Cornwall doesn't have facilities. I can assure you, 14 facilities in Cornwall, with all due respect to everybody who does his best around there, compared to what I've experienced up country, we say it, compared to even on the continent, where small villages will have far better and upgraded facilities to what we have. So Truro City, with all due respect, as let's say it cannot play there anymore, the closest facility within Devon and Cornwall outside of Exeter City, Torquay United and Plymouth is again more or less in Somerset, before we can go and have the same. So
yeah. No, it does. When you go around rural France, and every small town's got a sort of tailor-made stadium there in the village. It's shocking, the discrepancy, and and I do think if we're going to expect our young people to aspire to great things in sport or business or arts or whatever it might be, we've got to provide the facilities here. And as you say quite rightly, Jack, it would be for the benefit of all Cornish people, and schools would be able to hold their sports days there, and there'd be all sorts of other things which that G5 pitch could be suitable for.
What we think, well, I think it goes a bit further than that as well. I think you're right. When we've made some studies, if you look at how other countries embrace sport, they tend to look at the facilities to ensure that it's fit for purpose, and then they'll make a sport hub, and the council, the local council, and the government will join together to make with the clubs to ensure that there is a hub fit for purpose, and it's not become individual. They combine. I've seen that in Holland, seen that in Belgium, and in France we've seen that as well. Just something I've already seen recently, the Falmouth Hub, which is fantastic. But that's the sort of thing we need to have in all our main areas, in Newquay, in Bodmin, Truro, where we have the volunteers coming together, sharing the same clubhouse, the facilities around. I know that sounds easy because we've got, for instance, in Truro, you've got the rugby club at the top, and then elsewhere you've got other clubs. But something I think the government nowadays, just look at our fitness throughout the country, what the government now coming out, they suddenly realise we're obese. The whole country, 50% of kids up to 5, when they start school, are obese, classified as obese. Now, suddenly, that's created a problem. So what are they going to do about it?
Well, they should be ploughing money into anything which encourages physical exercise, shouldn't they?
Well, you go to a primary school in Cornwall. So we go to a primary school, the Cornish Park's got a great outreach. Is there much sport played in these primaries? No, there's activities, but sport is quite an essential part of growing up, character building. You talked earlier about my mindset in good. Okay, maybe I'm somewhat unique in cricket, but we need to have our children create sort of robustness, to grow a character, to understand what is a win, to understand what is a loss. It's nice to also to have activity, but I believe that clubs like the Cornish Parks, Truro City, Redruth, Rugby, Falmouth, Cricket, or whatever it is in Cornwall, are involved in the community, should be involved in these, in helping these primary kids, and we put, for instance, Sam's tea stuff for the Cornish Parts, goes to 70 primary schools and delivers his program for 6 weeks. 6 weeks is great to do, but it's not enough. It's good for nutrition. It's good for people it's great for enjoyment. Gives the kids a totally different environment, and they look up to some of the Cornish Parts players to come along. The aspirational thing you're talking about, where do we have it now? These poor schools are struggling on their budgets, whereas really that's the ideal captive audience the government should be targeting to ensure, let's make sure they have enough time to learn out about nutrition, to learn out about exercise, to learn out about win and lose, and to have a formative character, which sounds a bit old-fashioned, but I think mostly is the way forward.
Yeah, well, I think you're certainly pushing on an open door with me, and I suspect most business people in Cornwall when it comes to that. So to close, then, is there a breakthrough in sight? And secondly, and part of that, is there anything the business community can do to further rally round Jack to make this happen? I don't think there's many people in business who can't see the benefit of this facility for the community sports, for health and fitness, for aspiration, for young people, and of course with the partnership with Truro and Penwith College, they want to move their sports and business courses out there as well. So there's lots to be had. Anything more we can do, and is there a breakthrough site?
First of all, I'm sort of been on my preacher chair a little bit. I hope I've not come over what is negative. I try to speak an observation and what I've observed in the time I've been here. I think we've been involved now, and I've been in various sort of business fairs and around here. So I think what you've been doing now, it's you supported us fantastically. You recently had Lord Miners also interviewed as well. Suddenly, it's creating a bit more of a momentum rather than it did 2 years ago, that people cannot fully understand, even people with a certain level of understanding, a certain level of position within government, and are now seeing the real benefits it's required. So there is light at the end of the tunnel. There's absolutely no doubt about that, simply because how can you not want this to be built? Okay, you might want it to be in St Austell or in St Just or somewhere like that. But the fact that the fact that you have business facilities, that you have something which is going to improve a facility within Cornwall and not really costing them much, seems to me to be a no-brainer. People will be against it, but it seems to be necessary. There's been no infrastructure in sport for a long, long time in this place. So that for me is quite important. The business, I think what we'll be very keen upon is of course, once we get going, you can see what we hope we'll see, that life will get back into business wanting to get together. Your chamber has been very keen in having your breakfasts and your meetings and your networking, and we just sincerely hope that in the future that after COVID that will come back in, and I'm sure people will much prefer to talk face to face rather than via the network. Although which is the way forward, we can understand the benefits of it, but we still feel that
virtual bacon and eggs isn't very good, though, is it?
No, not really. Well, my bacon eggs this morning very nice, but that's another story. But it's true, and but you need somewhere for it to go. So why not have something which is in Cornwall, ready to go, fit for purpose? There's going to be a hotel. We can even become nationwide into what we can offer. Wouldn't it be great to try and get, what I try to say, the conferences from up country to come down and actually stay around as well. So this is, we'd love to be further part of the network. I feel that what we're trying to do with our foundation as well is to stimulate, to have the right coaches to go in and promote sport within these primary schools or secondary schools and have camps. And I've formed a foundation together with the Cornish Pirates and the college, the Truro and West Penwith College and Truro City, to try and find the foundation to create funds enough so we can put good coaches with quality into these schools, into the primary, and give them help in terms of understanding and to become healthier, to get the mental wellness going well, to look after the special needs schools as well. And you know, I'm hoping at some stage I can call upon your generous members to support this sort of foundation, this charity, to ensure that we get the right people delivering the right message at the right time into the right areas.
Great. Well, that's a really good call to action to the business community to end on. So, Jack, thank you very much indeed for your time today. And great to hear about not only your sporting success, but how you're trying to be an ambassador and pass that on to many more Cornish children in the future. And let's hope it comes to fruition. And let's hope that all your good work as an ambassador for the stadium does result in something which we're all really proud of as a duchy in years to come, where, you know, I can just see so many exciting things happening from there, and kids of the future saying, yeah, I learnt my sport at the Stadium for Cornwall, and that'd be great, wouldn't it?
Wouldn't that be absolutely brilliant that it's not just, and of course it's nothing to do, but that we don't have to rely upon our neighbours in Devon to bring, or in Somerset or elsewhere to bring people to a higher level. It would be great just to have something really which is Cornish born and bred getting to the right level. And
indeed.
Yeah.
And like the potential for renewable energy, something that Cornwall has the ability to grasp if we've got the aspirations to do it, I feel. So, Jack, thank you very much indeed for your time, and look forward to seeing you in the flesh soon. And hopefully we'll be having an event at the Stadium for Cornwall before too long. So thank you very much indeed.
Well, I thank you for your time, and I hope I'm not too disparaging on the offshore wind, but of course things are not so easy. So I think it just requires the right sort of.
Your realism on that makes your enthusiasm for the stadium even more pertinent, I think. So that's great.
Thank you. Brilliant.